film itself was directed by Vincent Minnelli, chiefly famous for musicals, Bandwagon, An American in Paris, Gigi. He was the great director of Hollywood musicals. The scriptwriter, this is probably of interest to me but no one else, was a guy called Norman Corwin, who was very famous in the days of sort of golden age of American radio. And I think he was respectful of Theo's letters and of the raw material that he drew on. Nonetheless, of course, it's a Hollywood movie. It's shot slightly pre-Technicolor, so it's shot in what was called Metrocolor, which is sort of soft, just rather softer colour. But it's an honourable Hollywood movie in my view.
When the book was published about 10 years ago, I appeared on Start the Week with Andrew Marr, and when we were all sitting in the green room, one of the other guests was Maureen Dowd, an American journalist who'd written a book, and I can't remember what it was about, but I was sitting there rather nervously awaiting doing live radio at 9 o'clock in the morning, and she very nicely, she got a copy of the book and she said, would you sign it to Douglas? And I, not really thinking very hard about it, I thought she probably would have a boyfriend called Douglas or something, and I just wrote to Douglas, and then it turned out she meant Kirk Douglas, because of course she'd gone out with Michael Douglas, so we had to insert the word Mr. in small letters. That was all rather awkward, and then we went on air. So anyway, so presumably she took it back and presented it to him. Whether he read it, I don't know.
You didn't hear from me.
I never.
Something that, of course, in the film there's this feeling of this impulsive, creative genius at work. But we know from the letters, don't we, that he was actually that he had very considered strategies about painting and how to go about it, and he was very influenced, wasn't he, by his time in Paris?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it probably is true that he was quite a fast painter, or at times quite fast. That was one of the things which his artistic friends taxed him with, was painting too fast. So what Gauguin said in the film was to an extent based on that was a line of criticism he was aware of. And his first letter to Theo claims that he painted La Lessienne first version in an hour, and the second version says 45 minutes, which is very fast for doing a full-scale portrait from life. Other paintings, I think the evidence is, for example, the paintings he did following Gauguin's idea that he should paint from his imagination. Some of those were much slower. There's one in St. Petersburg of a sort of imaginary view of a Dutch garden, and the paint is probably half an inch thick, and it's cracked, and you can see that there are layers on it. Obviously, he toiled quite hard on that one. I think it varied, and I think he must have preconceived to some extent. So yes, it wasn't just sort of a frenzy and attacking the canvas. I mean, for example, La Lessienne, where he painted it fast, he'd known the woman in question, who was Madame Genoux, for about 3 months when he painted it, so he had plenty of time to observe.
He did paint, I read that he painted, in 10 years he painted 800 paintings. And doesn't take into account the drawings,
yes,
and all these marvellous articulate letters. He was very well read, wasn't he? He spoke English.
Yes.
He was a reader of Dickens, and
a thought of David Hockney's is that actually when you add up the time he spent writing, the time he spent painting, there's not very much. I mean, of all the people we know about, there's more of his time assigned. He probably had a little bit left over for drinking and recreational activity. But he must have been pretty bit. And also, I mean, he read all of Zola's novels, all of Flaubert's novels, all of Guy de Maupassant. He was tremendously well read.
What do you think the madness? I mean, as it's kind of made a big feature in the film, what do you think was the cause of it? Because between times he was fine. When the attacks came on him.
There's a large and speculative literature about what might have been troubling Vincent. Well, when I wrote my book, I put the case to a friend of mine who happens to be a consultant psychiatrist and said, if you had a patient who came along and presented these symptoms, what would you think? And she said, well, I'd think about bipolar syndrome. So I sort of bought that idea, and it seems to fit the reported facts better than anything else, but there are several other possibilities, and as my friend Martin Bailey points out, there's no reason why there shouldn't have been more than one medical problem there.
He had syphilis.
I think he probably had syphilis, but I think he hadn't reached the tertiary stage. He seems to have contracted it. There are signs in the letters that he was quite worried about it, but he seems to have contracted it in Antwerp in 1885, 86, so it was sort of quite recently quite shortly before he died. And I think that wasn't what was causing the trouble. He seems to have had something seriously the matter with him as early as 1880, 81 at least, because his parents tried to get him to see a specialist in The Hague, which he refused to do almost a decade before he shot himself. So that suggests something which was pretty long term anyway. Not sunstroke, which is one of the suggestions, or paint poisoning, because he actually hadn't taken up painting at that point. He was just doing it.
How long did he spend with Gauguin then? Was that a long period of time?
Actually living together as a flat share or house share, 9 weeks.
Oh, really?
More or less to the day.
Yeah.
So it was a very concentrated period. There's a lot of work from both of them actually, although Gauguin was a slower painter. There's still a lot from there. I mean, you could make Gauguin was probably quite a good cook actually.
Yeah.
He certainly could cook. And French painters of that era, I think, invented the sort of, or just pioneered the Elizabeth David French provincial cooking style. There's a Toulouse-Lautrec cookbook, which is actually, Toulouse-Lautrec was a famous cook. I should think Gauguin was probably more serviceable, but he did all the cooking. That's all right.
Yeah, what did Gauguin do after he left? Did he go back? You said he was going to Brittany.
It was quite an odd performance actually. He left probably on the overnight sleeper from South France to Paris with Theo, and the next thing he did was attend a public execution of a murderer who'd been he and Van Gogh had been reading about this as a famous case. They'd apparently been following this murder in Arles in the papers, and apparently in 1888 there was still guillotining in public in Paris, and Gauguin went off and witnessed this, and he wrote 2 descriptions of it, as well as multiple descriptions of his time in Arles, and then a little bit later he produced a ceramic head, self-portrait, this little jug, it's in Copenhagen, with a sort of decapitated head with blood, no ears.
So strange that Vincent, suddenly, just pulls out the revolver or whatever. relatives.
Yeah, and that is still a bit of a mystery. Who gave him a gun? That was a
Exactly. I mean, I know it. I mean, the thing is, it wasn't Texas of the 21st
Yes.
century. So how easy was it, do you think, to get hold of guns?
Well, there were guns, or I mean, people were shooting the crows and,
Yes.
and that kind of thing, and probably this restaurateur was unwise enough to let him have it.
Ah,
But which would explain with who he was staying with, which would explain why it gets slightly erased from the record where he got the gun, because it would have been subject of considerable embarrassment
Really
and
hushed
legal
up, yeah.
repercussions
Yes, yes.
afterwards. But
Yeah.
the American biographers, or the last sort of full-scale biography, came up with this theory that he'd actually accidentally been shot by two upper-class teenagers who were in town,
Yeah.
which I don't really buy, and the Van Gogh Museum doesn't really buy, but it is true that in a detective story narration, you would, in which somebody had been shot and the weapon had vanished, you would start asking questions.
absolutely.
That's
And
true.
it's very strange that he's reported to have said on his deathbed, "I did it myself."
Yes.
I mean, at a time when, as far as I know, no one was suggesting anyone else had done it.
Well, there are oddities about it. On the other hand, here's a case of somebody who had committed self-harm on several occasions, and probably at least one suicide attempt before, and they commit a serious injury. I mean, it's not clear whether he was trying to shoot himself. He shot himself through the chest, managing to miss all vital organs, which is quite an amazing feat. But you wouldn't really look further for a culprit in a case like that, I think.